Eve, the first woman, was created from Adam's rib, and her story is one of the most foundational in the Bible. But what does this tell us about the purpose of creation, relationships, and humanity's original design? How does the first story of Genesis, starting with Eve, reveal God's plan for us from the very beginning? This video will explore the profound meaning behind Eve's creation and the significance of her role in God's perfect plan for mankind. By watching this video, you'll discover how Eve's story provides powerful insights into our identity, relationships, and the importance of understanding our origins. Are you ready to learn how the beginning of the world can speak into your life today and deepen your faith? Before we dive in, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps spread these powerful messages to others who need them. Let's explore how Eve's story can inspire us to live according to God's perfect design. In the beginning, God created Adam, the first man, from the dust of the earth. He formed Adam with great care and purpose, breathing life into him and placing him in the Garden of Eden. This creation was perfect. Adam was designed to live in harmony with God, to tend the garden, and to enjoy a personal relationship with the Creator. There was no sin, no separation, and no pain in this world. The intimate connection between Adam and God was a beautiful part of God's original design for humanity. However, as Adam lived in the garden, it became evident that something was missing. While Adam enjoyed a close relationship with God, he was alone, and God recognized that it was not good for man to be by himself. In Genesis 2 verse 18, God declares, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him." This is the first mention of the need for companionship, and it highlights that humans are created for relationships, not just with God but with one another. God's plan for humanity includes cooperation and partnership between man and woman. To address this need, God decided to create a companion for Adam. However, God didn't just create another man. He created a woman, designed specifically to be Adam's equal partner. This was a pivotal moment in creation, as God shows the importance of relationship and community in His divine design. The creation of Eve was not merely to provide Adam with a helper in the garden, but to establish a balanced, loving partnership where both could support and complement each other, fulfilling their roles in God's plan. God didn't create Eve in the same way He created Adam. Instead of creating her from the dust of the earth, He took one of Adam's ribs and formed Eve. This act was deeply symbolic, as it showed that Adam and Eve were not two separate, unequal beings, but were created to be companions and equals. By taking Eve from Adam's side, it demonstrated that she was meant to be a part of him, a reflection of his own nature, and yet distinct in her own way. Both man and woman are created in the image of God, but they have complementary roles. The fact that Eve was created from Adam's rib also emphasizes the closeness and unity that was intended between the two. Adam was to recognize her as part of himself, and she was to be his equal and helper. This is why in Genesis 2 verse 23, when Adam first sees Eve, he says, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh." Adam recognizes that she is not just a companion, but someone who completes him. Their relationship was meant to be one of unity, partnership, and mutual respect. The creation of Adam and Eve shows the beauty of God's design for human relationships. They were created to live together in harmony, reflecting God's image in the way they work together to fulfill the command to be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth. The creation of Eve was not only necessary for the companionship of Adam, but was also part of God's divine purpose to establish a balanced and complementary partnership between man and woman. This partnership was essential for humanity to fulfill God's plan for the earth, which included cooperation, mutual respect, and the sharing of the stewardship of creation. Eve was created to be a companion and helper to Adam, not just in a domestic sense, but in fulfilling the greater purpose that God had for humanity. Together, they were tasked with the responsibility of taking care of the earth, cultivating the land, and exercising dominion over all living creatures. The creation of Eve was essential in ensuring that Adam had a partner to share in this work, as God designed man and woman to collaborate in fulfilling His command. This partnership allowed them to work together, complementing each other's strengths and abilities to manage God's creation. Eve's purpose was not limited to being a wife to Adam, but she was an equal co-participant in God's plan for creation. The fact that Eve was made from Adam's rib symbolizes the equality between them. She wasn't created from his head to rule over him, nor from his feet to be beneath him, but from his side to walk alongside him as an equal. This physical connection reflects the spiritual and emotional bond between the two. They were created to be partners, working together to fulfill God's will on earth. Before sin entered the world, the relationship between Adam and Eve was one of perfect harmony. They were in sync with each other and with God, enjoying a deep and meaningful partnership. Their relationship was based on mutual respect, love, and cooperation. In the Garden of Eden, there was no shame, no fear, and no conflict. Both Adam and Eve were equal partners in the work they were given to do, and they did so with joy and unity. This harmony was part of God's perfect design for their relationship and for humanity's relationship with Him. Eve was created to complement Adam in every way. While Adam was tasked with naming the animals and tending the garden, Eve's presence brought balance. She was not created to do the same things as Adam, but to support him and help him with the work he was assigned. In the garden, they were united in purpose, each fulfilling their roles, but doing so together. Their union was not just a companionship for personal fulfillment, but a partnership to carry out God's plan for creation. The harmony between Adam and Eve also extended to their relationship with God. Both were created to live in perfect communion with their Creator. They had a direct relationship with God, walking with Him in the garden and receiving His guidance. The relationship between man, woman, and God was meant to be one of unity and peace. They were all connected in a way that reflected the divine order of creation, where each person played an important role in maintaining the balance of the earth and living in harmony with the Creator. In the Garden of Eden, before the fall, the relationship between Adam and Eve exemplified the ideal of partnership, love, and mutual respect. They were both equal partners, each fulfilling their roles and working together to care for creation. This harmony was a reflection of God's design for humanity, living in perfect alignment with one another and with God. Unfortunately, sin disrupted this harmony, but the original purpose and beauty of the relationship between Adam and Eve remain a reminder of God's intent for humanity: unity, collaboration, and love. In the Garden of Eden, the serpent, representing Satan, approached Eve with a tempting offer. The serpent questioned God's command and suggested that Eve could become like God, knowing good and evil, if she ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. This was the first instance of temptation, where Satan sought to plant doubt in Eve's mind about God's intentions. He made her question why God would limit her and whether she could trust His word. The serpent used Eve's curiosity, her desire for wisdom, and the promise of power to lead her astray. Eve, despite knowing God's command, was drawn to the fruit. She saw that it was good for food, pleasing to the eye, and also desirable for gaining wisdom. Genesis 3 verse 6. This moment of temptation highlights a deep truth about human nature: the desire for more, the attraction to what seems good, and the hope that disobedience might lead to something better. Eve's curiosity and the allure of the fruit clouded her judgment. She allowed herself to be deceived by the serpent's lies, thinking that she could obtain something that God had withheld from her, not realizing the tragic consequences of her actions. Though Eve was the first to eat the fruit, Adam, who was with her, also made the decision to eat it. His failure to lead and protect Eve in that moment, and his own choice to partake in the fruit, led to both their fall. This choice brought sin into the world, marking the beginning of humanity's separation from God. The sin of eating the forbidden fruit was not just an isolated act but a pivotal moment that affected all of creation. The disobedience of Adam and Eve marked the entrance of sin, which would ripple through history and affect every generation that followed. The immediate consequences of their sin were profound. When Adam and Eve ate the fruit, their eyes were opened, and they realized they were naked. Shame entered their hearts, and they tried to cover themselves with fig leaves, hiding from God. For the first time, they experienced guilt and fear, emotions that were foreign to them before their disobedience. They had broken the trust they had with God, and this sin caused a rift in their relationship with Him. No longer could they walk freely in the garden. They had lost their innocence and were now aware of their nakedness, both physically and spiritually. For Eve, the consequences of her actions were specifically outlined by God. He told her that she would experience pain in childbirth and that her desire would be for her husband, but he would rule over her. Genesis 3 verse 16. This speaks to the physical and relational consequences of sin, where harmony once existed between the couple, but now there would be pain and struggle in both the creation of life and in their relationship. Additionally, she, along with Adam, was now subject to death, as God had warned that eating from the tree would bring death. The spiritual death of separation from God was immediate, and physical death would eventually follow. For humanity as a whole, the consequences were far-reaching. Sin entered the world through the actions of Adam and Eve, and with it came suffering, pain, and separation from God. The perfect relationship between God and humanity was fractured, and the effects of this fall would be felt by every human being after them. Sin spread throughout all of creation, bringing disorder, death, and a need for redemption. However, even in this moment of judgment, God's mercy was evident. He promised a future redemption through the offspring of the woman, foreshadowing the coming of Jesus Christ, who would ultimately restore what was broken in the Garden of Eden. The story of Eve teaches us an important lesson about free will. When Eve chose to disobey God, she exercised her free will, making a decision that led to consequences not only for herself but for all of humanity. God gave Adam and Eve the ability to make choices, and it's through this freedom that we can follow God's will or give in to temptation. Just as Eve faced the temptation in the Garden of Eden, we too face choices every day. We have the freedom to choose to obey God or go our own way, and these decisions shape our lives and our relationship with God. Eve's story also highlights the responsibility and role of women in both creation and throughout biblical history. Eve was created as a partner and helper to Adam, showing that women have an equally important role in God's plan. She was not created to be inferior to Adam but as an equal, made to complement him. This partnership demonstrates the value and dignity that God has given to women. It's essential for us today to recognize and honor the role of women in society, the church, and the family. Women, like Eve, are vital participants in God's mission and should be treated with respect, love, and equality. As we reflect on the role of women, it's important to remember that God created both men and women in His image. Eve's creation was not a secondary act but a purposeful one that completed God's design. Her story calls us to appreciate the importance of women in the biblical narrative and to understand that the full picture of God's creation involves both men and women working together in harmony. This partnership is foundational for families, communities, and the church, where each person, regardless of gender, is called to use their unique gifts to serve God. Eve's actions also teach us about the consequences of sin and the need for redemption. While she was the first to sin, her story doesn't end with judgment. Through her, we see God's mercy and the promise of redemption. Although her disobedience introduced sin into the world, God had a plan to restore humanity through Jesus Christ. The consequences of sin were real, but God's grace and love for humanity were even greater. Eve's story points us toward the hope of redemption that comes through Christ, who offers forgiveness and the opportunity to restore our broken relationship with God. The redemption that Eve's story points to is ultimately fulfilled through Jesus Christ. Even though Eve's choice brought sin and separation from God, God did not abandon humanity. In Genesis 3 verse 15, God promises that the offspring of the woman would one day crush the serpent's head, a prophecy that points to Jesus' victory over sin and death. Through Jesus' sacrifice on the cross, the relationship between God and humanity is restored. Jesus, the second Adam, came to undo the damage caused by the first, offering forgiveness and eternal life to all who believe in him. Today, we can find hope and assurance in the redemption provided by Jesus. While Eve's actions had lasting consequences, they were not the end of God's plan for humanity. Instead, God's ultimate purpose of reconciliation and redemption was set in motion through the birth, life, and sacrifice of Jesus. Just as Eve was part of God's creation and plan, we, too, are part of His redemptive story. We can trust that no matter the mistakes we make, God's grace is always available to us through Christ, and through Him, we can be restored and made whole again. In conclusion, we've explored the story of Eve, who was created by God as an equal partner to Adam. Together, they were designed to live in harmony and fulfill God's purpose for humanity. However, Eve's disobedience in the Garden of Eden brought sin into the world, causing a separation between humanity and God. Despite the consequences of her actions, God offers redemption through Jesus Christ, who restores what was broken and offers salvation to all who believe in Him. As we reflect on the choices Eve made, we are reminded of the importance of our own decisions. Just as Eve faced temptation and made a choice, we too are faced with moments where we must decide whether to obey God or give in to temptation. The story of Eve challenges us to be mindful of our choices and to live faithfully to God, trusting that His plans for us are good. It encourages us to resist temptation and to rely on God's strength to live according to His will. In our lives, we can apply the lessons from Eve's story by seeking to live in alignment with God's purposes. Each day presents opportunities to choose faithfulness over doubt, obedience over disobedience, and trust over fear. As Eve's decision had far-reaching consequences, our choices also have an impact on our relationship with God and with others. By making choices that honor God, we contribute to fulfilling His plan for our lives, just as He intended from the beginning. Eve's story reminds us that even in the face of failure, God's plan for restoration is always present. While the fall of humanity began with Eve's choice, it is through Christ's sacrifice that the relationship between God and humanity is restored. This redemption is available to all of us, offering forgiveness and a renewed purpose. No matter how far we may stray, God's love and grace are greater, and He is always ready to welcome us back. As we reflect on God's design for humanity, let us remember His original plan for unity and partnership. In Genesis 2 verse 24, it says, "Therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and they shall become one flesh." This verse highlights the importance of unity and cooperation, not just in marriage, but in all relationships. God desires harmony and partnership in every area of life, and He calls us to reflect that in our relationships with each other and with Him. Let us close by considering the beauty of God's design for humanity and His plan for redemption. As we strive to live according to His will, let us remember that, like Eve, we have the opportunity to choose obedience, trust, and faithfulness. And through Christ, we can always find restoration and new beginnings.